Hi everybody, welcome back. So, where we left off, if I can get my computer working, here we go. Where we left off in our first part of our week 1 tutorial, so I'm just getting our window working there. So we left off talking about macro systems as part of Urie Bronfenbrenner's ecological levels of analysis. So of course, the ecological levels of analysis, what they allow us to do is look at social issues that affect people's mental health and well-being and help us to understand that there can be more than one cause of this particular social issue or psychological issue, and of course, more than one solution to these psychological issues or social issues that we're examining. So things like anxiety, depression, poverty, homelessness, etc. Now, what the ecological levels of analysis also allow us to do is they allow us to describe interactions between individuals and these multiple systems in which we all live. So all of us are going to belong to each one of these 5 different ecological levels of analysis in our lives, right? We are all individuals, right? We all have some sort of microsystem that we belong to. That we also belong to organizations, whether it's a workplace, a religious congregation, etc. We all live somewhere, right? We all live in a community, and we're all members of a country, a government, etc. So you can probably hear my dog walking in the background. So basically, the ecological levels of analysis are really important in community psychology. Again, they allow us to take a very critical perspective of understanding the different kinds of psychological and social issues that we are interested in preventing and treating in community psychology. The ecological levels of analysis will never go away in our course. Get to know them, become familiar with them, sleep with them next to you at nighttime. No, don't do that. But you can see where I'm going here, right? That the more familiar you are with the ecological levels of analysis, the easier of a time you're going to have in this course. Other concepts are just going to make a lot more sense, because as we go through the course and start talking about, the individual topics and the week-to-week content, we're going to talk about things like stress and support, empowerment, citizen participation, prevention and promotion. Now, these are all topics that will address what we have been talking about with these different ecological levels of analysis. You can absolutely bet that the ecological levels of analysis will show up on a test, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and, just become very familiar with these. So that's what I'll say about that. Now, so the next thing that we're going to talk about are the core values of community psychology. Now, community psychology is a discipline. It's an area of psychology that basically we have these values that we say up front. This is how we do business. This is how we do our work. We do our work with a particular set of values, certain approaches, goals, what's our end game, right? Now, other areas of psychology, they don't necessarily come right out and say, these are our values. And so this is a big way that differentiates community psychology from mainstream psychology. Okay, so I'm going to go through each one of these core values one by one, so you can see them listed here on the slide. So I'm just going to jump right to the next slide because we're going to get into them again one by one. All right, so the first core value, individual and family wellness. Now, we obviously care a lot about people and their families, even though we try to understand social and psychological issues from multiple perspectives. That doesn't mean that we are going to forget about people individually. So we obviously want to strive to increase quality of life. We want to help people live well. We want to support them to be physically and psychologically healthy, to attain their goals, and so what we do is, we look at using community interventions, which would of course include prevention, health promotion, and things like advocacy, right? Sometimes people need some support to achieve that individual sense of wellness. So that's a big part of what we do in community psychology. And then, of course, we always are thinking bigger. So we go from the individual level to collective levels as well, like communities and societies, because we believe that as much as possible, if we can help individual people and their families to live healthy lives, that is then going to contribute to healthy families, healthy communities, healthy societies. So we kind of approach it from two different angles, right? We approach it from the bottom with the individuals, the families, and we try to approach it from the top, what we might call, a top-down approach. And we'll talk a little bit about those terms in a little as well. So looking at government resources, be that municipal government, so the government that would, enact policies and programs at the actual city government level. So what are programs that are running in London, Ontario, versus what are programs that the province of Ontario is responsible for? Just last week, right, we got some really exciting news that the province of Ontario is moving forward with a pharmacare plan for young children and young adults, or for children and young adults, right? So that's obviously a huge announcement that's going to affect a lot of people in our province. So that would be an example of collective wellness that's being achieved through a provincial initiative. And then, of course, we have federal initiatives as well that affect the whole country. So we're looking at wellness. How do we help people and their families to be well? And then how do we help communities, societies, provinces, counties, etc., to be well? So some really cool stuff there. All right. Our second core value is sense of community. Now, this one probably goes without saying. It probably makes a lot of sense that in community psychology, we would care about how people feel, whether they, or if they belong to a community. Now, and again, this is based on really great research, but we know that if a person feels as though they belong to something, be that a neighborhood, a school, a family, a group of friends, a sports team, religious congregation, maybe they volunteer somewhere and that gives them a real sense of community, a bunch of different places, right? We know that if someone perceives that they have this sense of belonging, that they feel that they fit somewhere in our society, that it really, really improves their quality of life. It improves their self-esteem. It improves essentially just how connected they feel to other people. I will harp on about this over and over again throughout the course, but you will hear me say a number of times that human beings are social animals. We are social animals. Even the most introverted person in the world still needs someone, right? So we are social animals, and we thrive in relationship to other people. And there is so much really cool research happening right now around a sense of belonging, linking it to some of our biochemistry, the types of hormones that are emitted when we, for example, look into the eyes of someone that we love. We get flooded with all of these really nice hormones that make us feel very good. The hormone's called oxytocin, sometimes called the cuddle hormone. Really interesting stuff, right? And what this all has to do with is social support. We know that people who have a very high sense of community, who feel like they belong, that they are less likely to experience depression, anxiety, poverty, all of these things, right? And it comes down to social support. It comes down to the fact that we are social animals. We need to be in relationship with other people. All right. So the next core value, respect for human diversity. So in community psychology, we go beyond what we would consider kind of political correctness, right? It's not about walking on eggshells to, make sure we're not hurting people's feelings. This is about genuinely valuing diversity for all of the wonderful stuff that diversity can do for us. So this is recognizing that our society is incredibly diverse. Canada is a multicultural country on paper. So we have enormous diversity in our ethnic and racial identity in Canada, the nationalities of our citizens, where they come from, sexual orientation, gender, religion, whether you are able-bodied or disabled, your socioeconomic status. Socioeconomic status, by the way, for folks who are not familiar with that term, is kind of our fancy psychological way of saying, what's your financial situation, essentially? Are you what we would call kind of lower class, middle class, upper middle class, etc.? These are terms that do still get used quite a bit to refer to, essentially your financial situation. So again, goes far beyond political correctness. And basically, this is about acknowledging that we have enormous differences amongst us as a society, and that can actually be a huge strength if we acknowledge that. This isn't all about, painting everybody with the same brush or something like that. This is about recognizing, respecting, celebrating diversity. Good stuff. All right. Social justice. This is a big part of community psychology, if you haven't already noticed. We are all about improving people's lives. Now, community psychology, when we get into the next chapter, we're going to talk about the history of community psychology. Community psych comes right out of the civil rights movement from the United States. So the civil rights movement was obviously this time in the United States where we were very concerned about getting equal rights for African American citizens who were not being treated equally or equitably. So there are a couple examples of how we achieve social justice: distributive justice, procedural justice. Sometimes we do advocacy work with oppressed populations. Very important stuff. The next value is empowerment. What we want to try to do is enhance people's lives, enhance their opportunities by helping them regain a sense of control over their own lives. And that could be individually, it could be collectively, a community group, for example, that's improving opportunities for people within the community. So we want to improve people's opportunities, and that's all about empowering. The concept of power is pretty complex, actually. It might seem fairly simple, but we're going to talk a little bit about how power is actually very complex in a bit. And our last value is citizen participation. We want to make sure that people feel as though they can participate equitably in our society. and have a meaningful say. So that's where I'll end things for now, and stay tuned for part 3.